Welcome back to Can Business Save the Planet? Today I had the opportunity to sit down with Danielle Azoulay from the CSO Shop. She specializes in providing fractional-based services of a chief sustainability officer role for large businesses and large corporations. We had an amazing conversation talking about what it takes to implement sustainability on the board level and even in smaller and mid-sized businesses. It was very insightful to hear that the challenges that we're facing on a daily basis are also comparable in large corporations. I had a great conversation, and I think you're going to enjoy it. Let's dive in. All right, guys, welcome back to Can Business Save the Planet? Today, I am joined by Danielle Azoulay from the CSO Shop. Danielle, pleasure to have you here and pleasure to meet you.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited to join.
Of course. Well, for the viewers, I'd love to better understand the CSO Shop. What do you specialize in, and what area do you focus in?
Yeah, so I have a long career, about 15 years of implementing sustainability strategies inside some of the largest Fortune 500 companies in the world. Started my career in fashion, went into CPG and the beauty space, and then home goods and retail. And I left my last job and just sort of thought, I really want to scale my personal impact and take this knowledge and figure out how can I help many companies at once really start their journey to sustainability and implement or operationalize sustainability programs within their own organizations so it becomes really embedded within the business strategy and different functional areas. And so I knew of this model, which is very common within the startup world, the fractional model, but was new to this function of chief sustainability officers or CSOs. And I thought, this could be really cool to figure out how to be a fractional CSO to help many companies, no matter where they are on their sustainability journey. So, I'm not sure if you know this, only half of Fortune 500 companies have CSOs. And so when we talk about scaling business impact, really focusing on people who have the breadth of expertise, the experience of how to actually transform organizations from the inside, there's really not enough people with this skill set. And so it just felt like the right time and a way for this sort of new business idea to meet the moment where we really need to think about scaling sustainability within businesses more broadly. So,
Amazing.
So I'm a fractional CSO.
Amazing. Okay, so you're working with various different businesses in a part-time capacity to help support them on their sustainability journey. And I love that you said the word journey, because that's what we talk about a lot, right? It really is a journey in terms of the path forward and how to implement sustainability into a business. So I'd love to learn about your journey. And so I understand you're a boss, right? You've done some amazing things in the past, and I'd love to learn a little bit about, how you got involved in the sustainability space and how you came up in your career.
Yeah, sure. Well, I won't give you my whole life story, but sure. I will tell you that when I was 12 years old, I survived Hurricane Andrew. I grew up in Miami, Florida.
Okay.
And really, we were inside our house when our roof blew off, and sort of really from an early age started to understand the connection between a healthy planet and an ability for people to thrive, and not just survive, thrive, right?
Yes.
And at that time, the sustainability conversation was non-existent in terms of corporate sustainability.
Sure.
And of course, we had these amazing NGOs like Greenpeace and, WWF, like really leading the way on a lot of conservation efforts.
Yep.
But the conversation around how to engage the business community was not there. And so I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was really passionate about environmental issues, like Save the Whales was my, my campaign of when I was a kid. And actually, because I grew up in Miami, so close to the ocean, beach health, ocean health has always been a personal passion of mine.
Yes.
And I just wanted to sort of, so I needed to sort of figure out what am I going to do for my life? And so I followed my other passion, which was music. And I ended up working in the music business for a number of years. Mm-hmm. Then An Inconvenient Truth came out. And I was really thinking, doing a lot of soul searching. I was like, I can't, this feels like a peak moment, sort of the apex of like a career pivot for me. And um, what am I going to do? And I just thought I could use my business knowledge to help C-suite level executives understand the risk to their business because of climate change. And I went back for master's in environmental conservation and education at NYU. This is kind of before all these sustainability master's programs existed.
Yes.
And I happened to be working in the apparel industry at the time. I had a sort of survival job that was, I was the executive assistant to the president of Calvin Klein jeans and Calvin Klein underwear.
Okay.
And I always tell people, don't think survival jobs will not serve you well. I learned so much in that role on how C-suite level executives think, the day-to-day decisions that they're making. I function more of like a chief of staff to her than anything else. And she was really passionate about environmental issues, but also didn't understand how day-to-day business decisions that they were making within the organization were actually harming the environment. And wanted me to start hosting lunch and learns to just educate people across design, sourcing, product development, logistics, and just tell them like, hey, by the way, did you know it takes X amounts of water to like make one pair of jeans? Or did you know that our cotton is coming from all of these different regions and like the human rights issues endemic in those supply chains? And, the more I talk to people in these functions, the more they were just like, oh my God, I did not know this. And I don't want to be part of the problem. Like, can you tell me what I can do day to day in my job to like make things better? And so that's really, it started very organically. The company I was working for at that time was purchased by PVH. And so I moved into their, the global sustainability department. That was like my first official role as a sustainability practitioner. And I was working on sustainable supply chain initiatives.
Okay.
The first one was responsible chemicals management and how to set a standard for the company and activate their global supply chain around these common goals. And nobody really wanted to take on chemistry. I sucked at high school chemistry, but I still was literally sucked. I was just like, whatever. But that's when I realized like the development of a strategy and the implementation plan are kind of a different skill set than the technical skill set, which is so critically important, right?
Yes.
And I kind of found this like cool in between area of talking to scientists, talking to the chemists, understanding the business need, and figuring out how do we make these two things mesh to move forward on these critical topics, And from there, got recruited into a position at Marc Jacobs where I was, I started their sustainability program and managed their social compliance program. From there, got a job at L'Oreal USA, leading their program within the U.S., the expansion and transformation of the organization, which is their largest, the U.S. subsidiary is their largest subsidiary. And it's not just L'Oreal Paris. L'Oreal owns, I think at this point, over like 30 or 40 brands.
Wow.
And so it's working with some of the largest brands in the beauty industry and personal care space to help them understand their impacts and their, unique opportunities in terms of a brand and communications and how to activate their consumers and retailers, right? Like, so when you sit in this sort of in between space within the value chain, there's a lot of opportunity upstream in the supply chain, but also downstream to activate retailers and consumers and help everyone sort of, know what you're doing and what you're doing to move things forward. And then after about 4.5 years at L'Oreal, I moved over to Bed Bath & Beyond, where they were really reinventing their entire company and wanted sustainability and social impact at the core. I did a lot of work directly with the CEO and really wanted to, integrate these critical things into his future vision of the company from a business strategy perspective.
Sure.
It's also where I learned that trying to do this work on a shaky financial foundation is really tough.
Yeah.
And I was there for about a year and a couple months, and then left to create the CSO shop, and basically have been doing this for small to medium-sized companies at different places within the value chain, mostly on the consumer product side, but also materials innovation, AI, sustainability for AI, and just trying to think about how can we accomplish these goals faster, because these issues are more urgent than ever. I don't know, you probably already know this, but the Circularity Gap Report for 2024 just got released last year.
Yeah.
And despite all of these corporate commitments, we're actually less circular than we were the year before. And
Yikes.
So it's, these problems aren't going away. And also we need to come to the table with new ideas and new energy for how to make them better.
Yes.
I also teach circular economy as part of the Sustainability Master's program at Columbia. And,
Yes.
Getting to do that work is really wonderful and inspiring, and seeing sort of the next generation of sustainability practitioners and where their emphasis is, like what's lighting them up and how they're excited to do this work. And so, it's been a really fun ride, because I'm very grateful that I'm able to say at the end of the day, like, every conversation I have throughout the day does move the needle a little bit, even if
Yes.
it's just incrementally, right?
Yes.
But ultimately, thinking more broadly and long term about entire systems redesign,
Yes.
and how we have to be thinking about things in a different way if we want to, firstly, if we're going to solve this problem, and then secondly, if we're not going to get into another problem like this further down the road, what are the things that we need to do to sort of shift our thinking and mindset? So yeah, so that's, sorry, it's a real long-winded answer.
No, it's incredibly helpful. Like I said, you're a boss. Like I love to hear that, and it's amazing to meet someone like yourself who's able to have such impact with these various different organizations and truly move the needle. I think that that's something that I aspire to create here with 4Ocean, is our ability to work with businesses and to be able to provide options, solutions, ideas, concepts, and be able to start the conversation with them to show that sustainability is the right move forward. And I think that, working with these businesses has been very eye-opening to me. And I think, as you mentioned, your experience starting out being the EA, essentially the chief of staff, working directly with the executive team, and then the CEO of Bed Bath & Beyond, you have a perspective that is so necessary in the sustainability space. And I think that that's one thing that we're trying to connect with businesses on, is that, to be able to understand how to present ideas, concepts, how to understand how the business works and truly can be integrated with these sustainability programs. It's so important. And that's one thing we say a lot is, it's so important to work from within the boardroom, from inside out. And I think that we're trying to encourage consumers and brands and corporations and everybody to choose more sustainable options and implement more sustainable activities into their operations. And I think that's just such great insight, that you had the opportunity to spend time with these executives and really understand how to potentially implement sustainability, and then take those learnings for yourself and start the CSO shop. And so now you're able to literally work with so many different brands and have these powerful conversations. And I would love to know, when it comes to the different partners that you work with, what is the most common theme that you're seeing when it comes to sustainability and the thoughts around it, the hesitations, just the overall concept? What are you seeing when you're working with these large brands?
It's such a good question. And I think that what we are seeing is unique industry to industry, right? And also what we are seeing is unique and changes based on the regulatory environment.
Yes.
And also the level of awareness of the CEOs and board members and the investors. I have a lot of thoughts around how, the critical stakeholders and how they need to be educated and really taken on the journey. And each one of these stakeholders has a different point of view, right? Like if you're talking to the CMO, you're having a different conversation than you're having with the CFO or the CEO, right?
Yep.
And, you know, sustainability people or practitioners end up being these like sort of chameleons in terms of communications, because you have to tap into what each one of those people really wants and how and understand their goals for the year and how sustainability can be a catalyst for them achieving some of their goals, right? So I was once, you know, working with a CFO who couldn't believe how much money the organization was spending on employee travel.
Yeah.
It was like, you know, he was like, this is ridiculous. We have to figure out a way. And I was like, we have a way. We can also set a carbon emissions target around that, and we could achieve this goal together. And he was like, okay, let's do it, you know? Or, you know, chief merchandising officer who is putting together what they call like an online shelf for like a Gen Z consumer. Okay, well, why don't we go through our assortment and figure out which are the products that have a sustainability orientation and sort of build a shelf to tell a story, right? And help to acquire a new generation of consumers, right? And so you have to sort of meet people where they are and sort of figure out how to infuse sustainability into every single one of those conversations. Granted, you need a strong strategy. You need good buy-in from your board. And that's like one of the biggest challenges is today boards I don't think have the level of fluency that they need to have around sustainability issues and ESG issues. And they're being pulled in so many different directions. You know, they're trying to meet investor needs, and some of their investors say, yeah, we want you to go farther on ESG. And some of their investors are like activist shareholders who are like, we don't care about DE&I and ESG. You need to maximize profit. And so that is a ping pong game, you know, where you're just trying to figure out, well, how do you meet these two really differing and divergent needs from an investor perspective and help them come together? And ultimately, you know, a very easy way to thread that needle that I found is communicating it in terms of risk. But you know, that buy-in is challenging. It's also why I think from a business perspective, and I love the title of this podcast, obviously, it like really speaks to me, but I do think that from a reality check, business does have limitations in terms of how far they can go without really strong regulatory framework. And so, yes, it is absolutely incumbent upon consumers to make better decisions, but I am of the opinion that all consumer decisions should be inherently sustainable. So like really changing that system. But then also helping people understand that that system isn't going to change unless there is a regulatory impetus to do that in a meaningful way, in a way that's consistent across the board, and in a way that's actually going to make measurable impact, which is exactly what we need. And so, you know, I once heard the CSO of Apple talk about the role of business as a critical stakeholder in driving climate mitigation forward, and shouldn't this all be from, you know, really come from a regulatory perspective? And she had said something that I didn't really think about, was that you know, it takes regulation is about 30 years behind like an actual need in society. And if business isn't at the table speaking in a really loud and aligned and cohesive way, it makes the regulatory the job of the regulators harder, right?
Of course.
And which is what we're seeing right now play out in real time with like Scope 3 emissions and SEC, will we, won't we? And is this going to actually happen? Nobody knows, and all the things, right? And so, anyways, I just think it's an important thing to keep in mind that we have to continue to do this work in the private sector, even if it feels incremental, even if we know that the answer to unlocking like the real work is perhaps one of the answers is regulatory.
Yes.
We still have to keep pushing forward on it because we need to be able to meet the moment when the time is right on on the regulatory side.
Yes. And that's, there's so many things there that you said that I really resonate with. And I think that, the first thing that really stuck out is, the idea and the role behind someone in a sustainability space. It's their responsibility to essentially read the room, right? There's a lot of psychology involved when you're coming to talk about sustainability as a whole, because I think you said it best that, a marketer is going to want to know about, okay, well, what's consumer sentiment? How many impressions am I going to get? What's the type of reach? What's the brand lift that I'm going to get? Am I, associating with the new Gen Z audience? Or, that's something super impactful to your comment about the CFO. Hey, listen, we can cut down on travel, cut down on logistics expense, cut down on all these, T&E costs that we are, and it's going to benefit our goals to reducing our carbon emissions around the world. I think that's something that's so important, and it's a delicate dance, right? For someone in the sustainability role to read the room and be able to pitch and present these things in a way that is catered to the audience that they're being presented to. And, it's just unbelievable to think about, how many different ways that sustainability as a whole could really value and add value to a business and benefit a business. So that's incredibly helpful to learn more about how you view that and what you're thinking across the board when you're talking with these brands. And when it comes to some of the buy-in on the board level that you're talking about, I completely understand this, and it's imperative that there is buy-in across the board to really commit to some of these things. And when you talk about legislation and think about these different things, what's your view on that? Because I understand that you're saying that it is sometimes delayed and it can take longer than it is necessary. It makes actually the regulator's job much more difficult. And we believe that. That's why here at 4Ocean, we're trying to do as much as possible to raise awareness. We want to drive as much attention as possible to consumers, to brands, to nonprofits, to governments, because the more that we talk about these issues and the more that there's conversations around them, we find the more receptive people are to actually having a discussion around it versus that's just some crazy problem or this is something that I don't really see. Like, for example, ocean plastic. We get the comment all the time, like, isn't that just in developing countries that don't have waste management infrastructure? And what we say is, no, this is actually everywhere. We're in our backyard. We're literally cleaning up, 1,000 pounds out of Miami just the other day. Like there's massive amounts of plastic and massive amounts of issues that are affecting us all over. And so we're trying to generate these conversations so that we can have some discussions around, regulation, legislation, things like that. And so what are your thoughts when it comes to legislation and its impact on sustainability?
I think legislation, firstly, your point on ocean plastic is right. I was just at an Airbnb on the Jersey Shore, and we would take our dogs to the beach to just play on the beach because I love playing on the beach. And I was just heartbroken at the amount of ocean plastic.
Yeah.
A toilet seat, stuff that you're just like, how is this happening?
Yes.
So it isn't just a developing country issue. It is, we share an ocean, and
yes,
the water is constantly cycling. And so if something is happening in Asia, it's a matter of time before it gets to us. I don't know if you heard about that, the rubber duckies. This was years ago.
Oh, is that like the container ships?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
For your listeners, the container ship, there was a container ship that was carrying rubber duckies coming from China.
Yes.
And the container, I don't know this ship capsized, something happened. The containers, all basically rubber duckies all over the ocean. And they are still washing up on shore everywhere. And
Yes.
this has been like 30 years or something. I mean, maybe not 30, but something wild.
Yes.
I just read the same thing about Legos. There was a similar thing 20 years ago where something happened with a cargo ship carrying Legos. And people are going to these really remote beaches in Europe, in the US, and they're finding bits of Lego. And so we are all connected. And I think the more we can understand that, the more we can stop making this global north or global south responsibility, because it's a humanity responsibility.
Yes.
Unfortunately, what we're seeing, And what we're subject to are the many externalities that go along with day-to-day business today.
Yeah.
There are so many things, so many negative impacts that businesses are having on the world that are not reflected in the price, that they don't have to pay for,
Yes.
because there isn't a regulation to hold them accountable. And so what's frustrating about regulation is it's always reactive.
Yes.
Right? It's like something has to be polluted before we can hold someone accountable for cleaning up that pollution.
Yes.
And that's a real bummer. And that's not good as it relates to the environment. We would like to have some sort of, insight into how to keep things okay.
Yeah.
Or how to make things better without needing to, have an oil spill somewhere first, right? Like, we just have to get better at that. And so, I don't know. I think regulation is really critical. And I would hope that we'd be able to have smart policy. And that is where the challenge is.
I completely agree with you. And I think that, that's such a great point, that typically regulation happens in a very reactive state versus proactive state. And I think that it's almost like it has to prove that there is something that is going, catastrophically wrong to like, okay, now let's address it and now let's get ahead of it. But by the way, the damage is pretty done in that sense. So, and to be candid with you, it's a hornet's nest, right? Because there's so many different conversations around it that are very tough. And what we find is that a lot of the time, some of these conversations can be very divisive. And I think that what we try to bring people together around ocean plastic is we want to make it inclusive across the board. Everybody appreciates clean oceans and appreciates the future of our oceans for future generations. And I think that, when it comes to regulation, legislation, things like that, what we're trying to drive forward is just, we want to find solutions that are things that it's very hard to debate or to think or to feel that like, refute. Exactly. It's just finding common ground that like, yes, this is an issue. We all should address it. Let's find a very simple and straightforward, approach, and let's try and see what we can do to work towards that, because I understand that it's very complex and it's a little bit more difficult in that sense. So I completely agree with you, and it is it's refreshing to hear the idea and concept of getting more people together and trying to find these different solutions across the board.
What's great about ocean issues in my mind is, and this is like wildlife conservation or natural, public lands, there is a really interesting stakeholder group that comes together around these issues, because it's not just, hippie environmentalists. It's sport fishermen who are not typically like,
Yes.
You're not going to see them marching on Washington necessarily for climate change mitigation, right?
Yep.
It could be people who are really concerned about health and wellness, because now ocean plastic and microplastic is everywhere. It's in our brains, it's in our lungs, it's in our food, it's in our babies, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And so this is a issue that, what's hard about these big crises, because even if, let's say tomorrow we flip the switch and solve climate change, we still have ocean health, ocean plastic to deal with, which is, I think, one of the most critical environmental issues we're going to be facing with in the next 2 decades. And we're facing it now. Biodiversity loss. We are so far past so many of the planetary boundaries, and which is a measure of the 14 indicators for a livable planet, basically.
Sure.
And it's not a livable planet for the sake of like a healthy planet. It's a livable planet for the sake of humans being able to survive healthfully on a planet and thrive, right? And we're in a poly crisis. I've heard people talk about it in those terms, where there's so many things that are reaching a fever pitch at the same time. And
Sure.
It's hard to figure out where to focus. And what I tell people is, you just need to get in the fight. Like,
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, figure out what is your contribution Maybe it's designing a logo for a nonprofit. Maybe it's
Sure.
bringing a bag to a beach and like while you take a walk on the beach, just picking up some trash. Like it doesn't have to be epic to be
Yes.
impactful, right? And I think that is a really critical mindset shift that we all have to take responsibility for this everywhere we go, you know.
It's progress, not perfection. That's what we say a
100%.
lot. It's like, and I love that comment. Whether it's bringing a bag to the beach or cutting out, one water bottle from your daily routine or bringing that reusable cutlery, we're trying to encourage as many people as possible to take those small steps because together they're going to have a collective action. They're starting more conversations, and we're having more impact across the board collectively. So I completely agree with that. If you were to talk with a business that was interested in implementing sustainability initiatives, they felt passionate about it. They might be new, they're learning, they're trying to understand it, even small to mid-sized to even large corporations. What would be your piece of advice that you would leave them with to wanting to learn more on how to get more involved from a sustainability perspective?
That's a great question. I think it all starts with understanding where the impact areas are for your business.
Mm-hmm.
So that we can measure the improvements over time.
Sure.
And it's not just about philanthropy or, doing good, but we also have to create positive impact. That's like creating positive impact, but we also have to reduce our negative impact, right?
Yes.
And if we're creating positive impact without actually looking under the hood at the day-to-day decisions that we're making and making sure they're aligned with the kind of values-based organizations that we want to have,
Yep.
then we need to do that. And I obviously I support giving money to nonprofits who are doing amazing work all over the world. And I think corporate dollars are instrumental in moving those initiatives forward. But I think to do that without also committing dollars and resources to changing how you do things day to day is we're never going to get to the end goal that we really want to be at,
Yes.
And so I think it's a both and situation.
Got it. Understandable. Well, that's incredibly helpful. I really appreciate you coming on and speaking with me today, Danielle. This has been very insightful. I love digging into sustainability. I love the fact that you are, working with businesses, and if someone's interested in learning more about potentially partnering with you, where's the best way for them to contact you or learn more?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. Danielle Azoulay, or the CSO Shop has its own LinkedIn page. You can also email me, Danielle@thecsoshop.com. And we'd be happy to have a conversation with anybody that's interested.
Amazing. So if anybody's interested in learning more, potentially getting involved and learning more about what they can do to drive their sustainability initiatives forward, please give Danielle a shout, and she'd be happy to dive in. So thank you so much for spending time with us. This is very, very helpful, very insightful, and keep kicking butt. I really appreciate it and stoked to hear the progress you're making.
You too. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Wow. That was a great conversation. I really enjoyed the time with Danielle. And if you guys want to learn more about how you could potentially implement a sustainability program, reach out to her at the CSO Shop. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you're enjoying these podcasts, these interviews, these questions, please leave us a comment or review, subscribe. Just let us know what you think. We'd also like to better understand what topics you want us to address. You guys let us know. Let us know who you'd like us to interview, what topics you'd like us to cover. We want to continue to dive in sustainability and to get everything that we can for you guys. Until then, we're going to keep cleaning the ocean and continue asking the question, can business save the planet? We'll see you guys on the next one. See ya.